Hello, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar on medical device pathways to market for China. Just a little note about us. We are a leading provider of regulatory affairs, quality assurance, clinical research, product testing, and safety certification services for China and Hong Kong. And we have over 20 years of experience. In addition to medical devices, we specialize in pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, health foods, industrial and consumer products. We have about 100 employees worldwide with 12 offices, 6 of which are in Hong Kong and China. Now, please allow us to introduce ourselves before we begin. Anthony.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you for your time and joining us for the webinar. I've just joined Khizema, heading up as Director of Sales for the US market, medical device, drugs, and cosmetics. Previously, I worked for Carl Zeiss, selling their imaging equipment in Hong Kong and Macau. And again, thanks very much for everyone joining the presentation. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will do our very best to address them within the confines of time at the end of this webinar.
I'm Jackie, and I've joined Khizema for over 4 years now. I've studied my bachelor's in Canada and previously worked in Bureau Veritas that specialized in testing, inspection, and certification. Currently, I'm the lead to support Hong Kong medical device listing and drug registration applications. So today we will give a brief recap about the typical NMPA registration process for medical device approvals in China. We will briefly talk about the NMPA green channels, but of more importance will be the expedited pathway for innovative products to market in China, as well as Hong Kong MDAX listing as a major requirement to the GBA pathway. In 2023, the NMPA received a total of 13,260 applications for the initial registration renewals and changes in licensing items of Class 3, domestic and overseas, and Class 2 overseas medical devices, increased by over 25% as compared to 2022. Amongst these applications, the NMPA approved a total of 12,213 applications, with an increase of about 2.3% as compared to 2022. The NMPA handled a total of 3,118 registration applications of imported Class 3 medical devices, an increase of 16.4% as compared to the previous year. The NMPA handled a total of 3,036 registration applications of imported Class 2 medical devices, an increase of 23.1% as compared to 2022. The NMPA also handled a total of 2,453 filing applications of imported Class 1 medical devices, an increase of 21.2% as compared to the previous year. In 2023, products from a total of 31 countries or regions were approved for sale in China. Among them, medical devices from the United States, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and France ranked in the top 5 in terms of the number of initial registrations of imported medical devices in China. The registered product quantity from these countries accounted for approximately 77% of the total number of initial registrations of imported products in 2023, a slight increase compared to the previous year. The top 5 imported medical devices in terms of registration quantity are mainly passive implantable devices, dental instruments, ophthalmic instruments, medical imaging devices, and active surgical instruments. Compared to 2022, there have been some significant changes with ophthalmic instruments replacing infusion, nursing, and protective equipment, and active surgical instruments replacing neurological and cardiovascular surgical instruments. The quantity of passive implantable devices increased by 43.3%, dental instruments increased by 57.8%, and the registration quantity of medical imaging devices decreased by 44.2%.
And now to some more specific trends we have seen in terms of product registrations. I have selected these product categories on the basis of recent trade fairs we attended, including the world's biggest health, dental, and medical laboratory fairs in Dubai. This is in addition to industry news, the NMPA official website, plus 2024 research on factors affecting speed of approval. Faster approval was seen for innovative products that avoided higher risk classification, along with products that reduced invasiveness and risk of infection. Particularly noteworthy, and that reflect China government priorities, were, firstly, wound care gels that quicken healing and that are resistant to physical disturbance. Typically, these gels are reapplied per change of cast, a task which can equate to millions of man-hours per year, a task now arguably made redundant. Secondly, wound closure devices that don't touch an open incision, making them to be in a lower risk classification and therefore faster to approve within the confines of the typical approval pathway. The third device, or the third category of the device, were oxygen administration devices that reduce breathing-related complications and those that avert the intubation of patients, including putting them on a ventilator. These are innovative medical devices that we see as being on a faster track to approval. As an aside, we have seen new NMPA regulations regarding electrical devices and humidifiers that are now in effect, and that many companies in the respiratory device field may not be aware of these new regulations and to their risk. As for dental and medical laboratory, these were some noteworthy products as well. Firstly, synthetic bone grafts that are a win-win for maxillofacial surgeons and patients. These newly available materials lower the chance of repeat surgery while enabling nutrition and better remodeling. Secondly, rapid turnaround time near patient diagnostic panels that help triage patients based on inflammatory biomarkers, as an example. These kind of triage panels help decide whether or not to keep certain patients in the ICU. One benefit of these limited panels for triage is that, given that they use few biomarkers, this means a low total cost of registration, especially if it can be shown through real-world data that they are clinically significant for triage. Thirdly, polishing and cleaning devices that were not only more effective and safe, but also not subject to volume-based procurement owing to their high-tech status. In the case of lower-tech devices that were not as advanced, we also saw some dental cleaning devices that could justify volume-based procurement due to the sheer number of guaranteed units. Importantly, we saw some impressive new dental implant surfaces superior for osseointegration and tooth transplant in people under 16, in addition to AI-assisted implant surgery software that is used for planning of implant surgery and that is already well commercialized outside of China. And now for the 9 o'clock news, for those that get the joke. News item 1, long story short, it is now clear that MDAX listing is required to sell in Hong Kong public hospitals. Therefore, there is a stronger reason to get that listing. In addition, it can allow staged entry via the Hong Kong GBA route before going China-wide with a product registration. News item 2, also long story cut short, China NMPA is expanding the scope of data it will accept in the clinical evaluation of medical devices, plus standardizing the guidelines about the type of clinical data and study design it will accept. It now provides clearer technical guidance for foreign applicants conducting real-world studies and for regulatory authorities in their technical evaluations. This means more clarity regarding what studies the NMPA will accept and the quality of data to be met. Again, real-world evidence only supplements formal clinical evaluation, but what the most recent announcement means for your China approval strategy is that medical devices with solid real-world data will be expedited in their approval. please keep in mind that it was only in 2018 that a pilot scheme was rolled out whereby imported medical devices could be included for real-world data application trials, with the glaucoma drainage tube being the first product to gain approval in March of 2020. And now we will discuss more specific pathways to register in China, and over to Jackie.
Thanks. So on the slide gives an overview of the possible pathways to obtain the approval for medical device products to sell in China, and other alternatives such as the GBA pathway or Hainan Boao Liqing International Medical Tourism Pilot Zone. Starting from the left, of course, is the typical registration, which is the standard route for China approvals. This normally requires home country approvals such as the CE mark, FDA, 510K, UKCA, etc. In our next slides, we will talk further about the requirements, process, and timeline. As there won't be enough time for us to go into detail for fast-track approvals, namely priority review, emergency approval, and conditional approval, please reach out to us by email if you would like to obtain more information. Innovation approval is intended to encourage technological advances and research and development, providing faster route to market for especially designated devices and IVDs. Innovation received special emphasis in Order 739. Early priority review with dedicated reviewer and guidance throughout the registration process. In particular, a very important point is home country or country of origin approval won't be necessary for the China Innovative Approval Pathway. Additional support can be expected for technology, funding, financing, procurement, and reimbursement, as well as things like special awards for institutions and individuals who have deemed to have outstanding contribution to innovation. The major requirement is a working principle of the product to be the first in China. Performance and product safety should be comparatively better than products similar in the market, and it has internationally leading technology with significant clinical application value. Most importantly, there needs to be a China patent and complete studies on the prototype with traceable data. If such products are highly needed for clinical use and considered leading technology product, although not necessarily a completely unique product, the average and review approval time can be shortened by a number of months. If such a product is highly needed for clinical use and considered as a product with leading technology, according to our experience, the average review and approval time for innovative medical devices can be shortened by 2 or more months. For Hong Kong medical device listing, medical device products with listing approvals granted by the Hong Kong Medical Device Division will be publicly listed under the MDAX, Medical Device Administrative Control System. And the listing information can be found online on the official MDD website for public access. The Department of Health in Hong Kong has announced on behalf of public hospitals that for procurement, those medical devices with MDAX listing will have a higher priority for tender. These products will then meet one of the major requirements to be imported to the Greater Bay Area via the expedited pathway, also known as the Ganglao Yaoxietong, but we will refer to it as the GBA pathway moving forward in this presentation. We won't be going into detail for Hainan, but if you would like to know more information, please get in touch with us.
And in the background, of course, we have the chain of command, the China state apparatus. And at the top, we have the State Council, and on the left-hand side, colored in blue, and on the right-hand side, colored in green. As you already know, the NMPA replaced the China FDA in 2018. This was simply a renaming. The State Council is the supreme body and sets laws such as the so-called Decree 739, which emphasize innovation, coming into effect in 2021 summer of. Regulations as well as national and industry standards are issued by the NMPA that you will see under the SAMR in the left-hand blue column. The NMPA is the central regulatory authority for medical devices and IVDs, along with cosmetics and drugs. Those are all sectors that we cover, but the focus of today's presentation is, again, faster approval for medical device and IVD. The NMPA takes instruction from the SAMR, which stands for State Administration for Market Regulation, which is responsible for post-market surveillance, patents, as well as quality control, plus drug and food safety. The NMPA is under the supervision of the SAMR, which acts as a super ministry of sorts. The NMPA is responsible for all imported MD and IVD, as well as Chinese-made Class 3 medical device and IVD. Technical review guidelines are set by the CMDE, which you will see in the green bordered box underneath the NMPA. The Center for Medical Device Evaluation, CMDA, is part of the NMPA and is responsible for the technical review of regulatory applications for medical device and IVDs. As you can see, there are several subunits of the NMPA other than the CMDE with whom our staff have direct contact, for example, to oversee lab testing. Regarding the right-hand side colored in green, this is the provincial pathway. You will note that Chinese manufacturers of Class 1 and 2 medical devices can submit their application and registration of their products to the provincial NMPAs. A recognizable advantage of this structure is that the application fees of some NMPAs are cheaper than those of the NMPA. However, higher risk category medical devices from Chinese companies will also, like foreign products, need to go via the NMPA for regulatory approval.
So what does the registration procedure look like if your product belongs to risk class 1? Class 1 products do not require testing or clinical trials in China. It is a relatively straightforward process that is purely administrative. It includes the preparation of the application documents, the preparation of the PTR, product technical requirement, the notarization of the documents, and finally, the submission. The documents must be submitted in person to the NMPA by your NMPA legal agent. If the documents are complete and meet the formal requirements, the certificate will be issued on the spot on the same day with an NMPA stamp. In our experience, the application process for Class 1 products takes a total of 2 to 4 months.
Now, in a slightly more common scenario where we're doing a registration and not simply a filing, then we're talking about Class 2 and 3 medical devices along with IVDs, and these are all the relevant steps. As you can see, it is a relatively drawn-out process, and we advise as a time frame, roughly speaking, that it's 18 months to get approval for Class 2 medical device, and in the case of a Class 3 medical device, 21 months, assuming that there is no clinical trial, which is something that we avoid as far as humanly possible. Now, of course, the approval process depends on the classification of the product, which is based on the potential risk and the stated use of the product. In China, there are 3 risk classes, 1, 2, and 3, in ascending order of perceived risk for medical devices and IVDs. As we said before, Class 1 only requires registration with the NMPA, while Class 2 and 3 require a more complex registration application, often with the help of an external consultant to make things smooth. Now, the NMPA requires comprehensive documentation from all applicants for the registration of medical devices. Foreign applicants must submit documents in both English and Chinese. Documents prepared in China, such as test reports, must only be submitted in Chinese. This also applies to clinical evaluation reports, referred to as CERs, excuse a number of abbreviations. More on this topic in a moment. We provide our customers with a checklist for application documents with templates. Product technical requirements are of crucial importance, referred to as PTR. They are the basis for test centers to prepare relevant tests. Then, including the test center report, the PTR becomes part of the registration dossier. It is then attached to the final certificate. This is mandatory for registration renewal, for post-market surveillance, inspections, including factory inspections, and required by hospitals during the sales process. Unfortunately, tests are mandatory because they have to comply with Chinese technical standards, e.g., test reports on electromagnetic compatibility, electrical safety, biocompatibility, and so forth. Whether a clinical study is required as part of the registration process can be clarified by asking us a few questions. We regularly carry out feasibility studies for our customers thinking of going to China. For example, is my product of a very high risk? If it is, a clinical trial may be required. But is the product on a list of products or devices exempt from clinical trial? If it is, then clinical evaluation and/or trial may not be required at all. But is there sufficient qualified clinical trial data from abroad? If there is, clinical trial in China is not required. Another question, are there any predicate products that have already received NMPA registration? If there are, is sufficient clinical data about the predicate product legally available? If it is, then no clinical trial is required. If the answer is no, there isn't any such information legally available, then a clinical trial is required. For IVDs, the questions are slightly different. For example, is it a neonatal product? If it is, then clinical trials will be required. Is the IVD, just as with the medical device, on a list of products exempt from clinical trial? If it is, then clinical trial is not required. Is there sufficient qualified clinical trial data from overseas for the IVD? If the answer is yes, then overseas clinical trial data plus differential analysis and measures of the treatment will be needed. If these data are not available, then clinical trials will be required. The application documents, importantly, can only be submitted by a China-based legal entity, the NMPA legal agent. We can be the NMP legal agent on your behalf. Another one of our recurring services, often in demand from people who have had issues with their distributor. As for the costs and timeline, we can now give some ballpark figures segmented by class. So for class 1 medical devices, it is roughly 10 to 15,000 US dollars with nil fee payable to the NMPA. As for class 2 medical devices, the ballpark figure is 100,000 to 120,000 US dollars, with $30,000 going to the NMPA as a fee, and the rest going to our expertise, time, and also test fees. Likewise, for class 3, there is a ballpark figure of 150 to 170,000 US dollars, with about 45,000 going as a fee to the NMPA, and the remainder again for test fees, which are substantial, along with our expertise and time. And there may be additional fees, for example, the translation of English or other language materials into Chinese. As for the timeline, and these are based on our experience, but of course vary, class 1 products will be approved in roughly 4 months, and it's a relatively straightforward matter, provided that they are properly assessed and the homework is done. Class 2, 18 months, class 3, 21 months.
Just a quick overview of the current organization structure of the Hong Kong government's Health Bureau, which was newly established on July 1st of 2022 after the Food and Health Bureau was being restructured. The Department of Health is the only department under the Health Bureau and responsible for overseeing the safety, efficacy, and quality of medical products marketed in Hong Kong. Set out on the right is the Hospital Authority. The Hospital Authority is a statutory body managing all the government hospitals and institutes in Hong Kong, whilst both the DOH, the Department of Health, and the HA Hospital Authority are responsible for reporting to the Hong Kong Health Bureau. The reason for mentioning the Hospital Authority is because they are responsible for purchasing pharmaceuticals and medical devices for Hong Kong public hospitals. As mentioned, medical devices procured or commonly used in Hong Kong public hospitals and also drug registered in Hong Kong are major requirements for the GBA approval pathway. The Drug Office was established in 2011 and is responsible for drug registrations in Hong Kong. The Medical Device Control Office, MDCO, was established in 2004 and renamed as the MDD, Medical Device Division, in 2019. The MDD is responsible for implementing the Medical Devices Administrative Control System, MDACS, under which manufacturers and importers can list their medium to high-risk medical devices and IVDs with the Department of Health. On October 25th of 2023, the Hong Kong Chief Executive's policy address outlined plans to set up a preparatory office for the Hong Kong Center for Medical Products Regulation, the CMPR, aiming to streamline regulatory processes and foster research and development in the medical sector. The Hong Kong Chief Executive said in his speech that the public may expect potential upgrading of the CMPR as a standalone statutory body in the long run to help accelerate the launch of new drugs and medical devices to the market. Hong Kong's Secretary of Health, Lo Chung Mao, said in an exclusive interview with Hong Kong newspaper Singtao Daily that the CMPR is expected to be implemented in the first half year of 2024. This means that the major regulatory updates in Hong Kong may come along upon implementation of the CMPR. Our suggestion to manufacturers interested to enter the Hong Kong and GBA market is to have their medical devices listed the sooner the better, because it puts you in a ready position for sales to public hospitals in Hong Kong and then the GBA. Here in the slide, we can get an idea of the market size of Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area by comparing the population size to countries in Europe to indicate the market potential. The Hong Kong population is a bit less than Switzerland's population. However, we can see that the population in the Greater Bay Area already exceeds UK's population. As of February 6 of 2024, 4,726 medical devices were actively listed in Hong Kong, and we expect the number of Hong Kong applications to increase substantially due to Greater Bay Area developments. As of January 16, 2024, 56 medical devices and drug products in total have obtained GBE pathway approval to be used in the designated hospitals. Here you can see how a Hong Kong MDACS listing through to China-wide approval might work. A product should be listed in Hong Kong. Manufacturers then need to offer the product for tender to the designated Hong Kong-owned hospitals in the Greater Bay Area. An application is then made to the Guangdong Medical Products Administration, the MPA. Currently, the designated medical institutions play a key role in submitting the application of Hong Kong medical devices on behalf of the applicant to obtain the Guangdong MPA's approval. With the introduction of the Ganghao Yao Xie Tong system, or the Greater Bay Area pathway, the entire process of bringing medical devices and drugs to the Greater Bay Area from Hong Kong will speed up significantly. And it is important to recognize the value of establishing effective communication with the GBA medical institutions. Once the product is approved by the Guangdong MPA to enter the Greater Bay Area market, sales in the GBA designated medical institutions can begin. This will allow the manufacturer to collect real-world data within the GBA, for example, within mainland China, which will be especially useful for evaluating any ethnic differences, if and where this is required. This will allow the NMPA application to be submitted based on real-world data and thereby circumvent the need for clinical trials in China.
So now we will discuss a few top tips for market entry to China. Firstly, please evaluate carefully the different options that exist for going to China, including accelerated or alternative pathways like the Hong Kong to GBA route or the innovative approval route, sometimes referred to as the green route. Secondly, do your homework with the help of a company like Kisema understand what the China testing requirements are, speak to the test lab consultant, be clear about what's coming up, or even conduct internal validation tests if you have the time and resources to be that ready. Most importantly, keep your commercial operations separate from your regulatory, if it's all possible. I think everybody in this webinar knows that China can be a different ball game, and it is not advised to rely solely on a distributor, even if a trusted ally historically. Of course, it goes without saying to think long term, to stay objective, and critically, China product registration is both realistic and achievable, particularly if you have a competent partner like Khozema that has been doing it for decades. How can Khozema help specifically? Jackie will now close out the presentation with some of our core services.
So at Khozema, we can assist you through the whole life cycle of your medical device or IVD. In pre-registration, we determine the best regulatory pathway for a product, and in some cases, it's not clear-cut whether clinical trial data is required or whether predicates can be used. We offer a feasibility study to examine this in detail. We also develop clinical trial protocols and design clinical trials that fully conform to China regulatory requirements. And we are a CRO undertaking clinical trials in China. For registration, we have been an NMPA legal agent for many years. So this means we can undertake the filing of your Class 1 and the registration of your Class 2 and 3 products, as well as the index listing. We also support type testing as we have staff placed within national laboratories to follow your product through its test. And of course, we can help adapt your labeling to the Chinese market. And once your product is on the market, we ensure it remains fully compliant with our PMS. We can assist with advertisement applications, and as CRO, we can undertake post-market clinical follow-ups and observational studies in China. We also assist with overseas factory inspections and China audit, and can adapt your GMP, QMS, and SOPs to China requirements. And when you're ready to take the step to manufacture in China, we can assist you with transferring and localizing your product licenses to Made in China.
And thank you very much once again, and have a lovely rest of the day. It's the evening for us in Hong Kong, but wherever you are in the world, have a lovely morning, afternoon, or early evening, and see you later.
Thank you.